Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Championship Leadership Podcast. We got Nicole Jansen here, just outside of San Diego in sunny California. Thanks for joining us here today. I appreciate it, Nicole.
Thank you, Nate. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so I always love to kick off our conversations with this question, which is the Championship Leadership is the name of the podcast. What comes to mind for you? What does championship leadership mean to you when you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really means excellence. It means operating at a standard that is above the norm. And I mean, championship doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be winning where somebody else is losing.
Mm-hmm.
You're really playing against yourself.
Yeah.
And you're in your best. You want to keep getting better. So to me, that's what championship leadership is, and inspiring others up to that level of standard.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Well, tell us a little bit more about you and kind of the path that you've been on and how that's taken you to where you are today. You get your coaching business. You also have a podcast called Leaders of Transformation. So would love to hear just a little bit more for the listeners on how you've gotten to where you are today and what you're up to.
Sure. Well, so I know you're an ultra marathoner, and I think of like I'm on this ultra marathon of life, if you will.
Yeah, right.
I started out in an entrepreneurial family. My parents owned businesses, worked really hard, 7 days a week, just all out. My dad was in the garage industry, and my mother helped in the business. And then they started a side business in network marketing, and so they were like all in. If we're going to do this, then we're going to do it. And so they did. And it went really well initially. And then my dad got the bug to invest in other business ventures. And so I watched this journey of the highs and the lows and everything in between. And I actually started my own business officially when I was 16. I was doing things. I was selling jewelry, making jewelry when I was, in grade school.
Yeah.
And then I started my own business. I just knew I wanted to be in business for myself. And so I did that. I was 16 years old, and it was sales and marketing. That's what I was going to do. And I didn't know the specifics of what the business was going to be about. I just knew I wanted to be in business for myself. And so journeyed along that and got scuffed up a little bit. Things didn't work.
Yeah.
You're 16, right. You're like, oh, by the time I'm 18, 20, I'll be financially independent.
Yeah.
I'll have this all done. Done and done. Well, it didn't quite work that way. And so, but I learned a lot on the way, did create some success. Also ended up partnering with my parents in their business because I was invested so heavily in that business already.
Mm-hmm.
And so we built a very successful business, which was international in I think it was 10, 11 countries. And that's what I thought I was going to do the rest of my life. We had an 8-figure business. It was great and accelerating. And that's back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And so, but life takes different turns along the way. Yeah. And so that business ended up falling apart, and it actually fell apart because of what we were just talking about in terms of leadership. It was the leadership and the lack of good leadership that caused the demise of that business. Mm-hmm. And my pridefulness of not wanting to take a front seat in that business. I kept saying, oh, no, it's your business. I'm helping you with your business. Right. Yeah. And so I'm just back here helping out and doing my thing and the operational side. But when the rubber met the road, if you will, I didn't realize until then that I'd actually positioned myself to lack any influence over the decisions that were made and some of the impact that happened. And so I learned a lot about leadership and about stepping up into a position of leadership, not out of arrogance, but out of requirement and out of responsibility. And so that was a real eye-opener. And then I went on after that business it did fall apart. And so I asked myself, okay, so I just spent nearly 20 years on that. What are we going to do now?
Right.
And so I extracted all of the lessons that I had learned on the way up and on the way down. and everything in between, the human behavior, the team building, the, like I say, the leadership and lack of, and business systems, developing, helping people launch their business. And so then that's how I started Discover the Edge, which was really initially to help people with one of the fundamental focuses or fundamental skills you need to have in business, which is understanding people and understanding people dynamics. But that quickly led to me working with business owners and their teams, and realizing that it wasn't just about that. There was so much more that I could offer to them in terms of developing systems. I mean, yeah, you can understand people and engage with them well, but you also have to have the systems and the infrastructure to support their success.
Yeah.
And for them to operate at that standard, you've got to have the systems and operating systems in place. And so I started into that, and I went into full blown business coaching back in 2005. And then I bought a franchise, and because I thought, they said, oh, we've got the system,
Yeah.
buy our system and use our system. Well, they didn't quite have the system in place. So to put it mildly, so that was a mess. And so I ended up spending a lot of money in that business and learning, again, so much more.
Yeah.
And that's a lesson, because, I talk about the ultra marathon of life. It is a journey, and you learn along the way. And sometimes, you take detours, sometimes you get roadblocks and so forth, but it's, what do you learn along the way? And so I just kept building on. I could have looked at those as setbacks, each
Right.
of these situations, but I looked at them as stepping stones to move me forward. And so I learned a tremendous amount out of that. And then went back to focusing on my own brand again, and then building into what I do now, which is business coaching, and it's life mastery, business mastery, kind of put all together into how do you create a business that you love, that you're doing what you're great at, what you're passionate about, and what you have expertise and experience in. So that competence, and marrying that with a gap in the marketplace. And then the Leaders of Transformation podcast was really an inspiration. It was a divine download. It was an instruction. It was like, you're going to do this podcast, and this is what it's going to be called. 4:30 in the morning, wake me up. And it's been an incredible journey to be able to connect with, people that I had known over the years, that I reconnected with some great leaders and people that were creating transformation in the world. And then meeting a whole lot of new people that are doing some amazing things, and being able to interview them. We've done over 330 episodes now, and we have listeners in 140 countries, and it's just been amazing. And it's, even though when I first started this journey, I thought it was going to look a certain way, and it doesn't look anything like that.
Yeah.
It's actually better than what I would have anticipated. So yeah, it's all good.
That's great. Thank you for taking time to go through that and kind of let us in on that journey. You've mentioned this a few times. Well, first, the one thing I want to come back. So hang on a second. The Leaders of Transformation. So you said that was something that came to you while you were sleeping, and just woke you up and was like, I got to go do this thing.
Yes.
Tell me more.
Yeah. So that was literally a 4:30 in the morning on a Saturday morning that I woke up, and it was like God said, you're going to do a podcast. It's going to be called Leaders of Transformation. I had the name. I was going to use it for a mastermind, and it was kind of like on pause at that point. And so it was like, Leaders of Transformation is what you're going to use it for, and you're going to interview difference makers and world changers. Go.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love it.
So yeah, I was like, now, like, I'm going to do this now. I mean, I don't know that I want to do a podcast and so forth. And I was just being obedient to it. I had no idea where it was going to go and how it was going to fit into this whole journey, but it fit perfectly. And in fact, it was just incredible because of it's been incredible because the people that I've gotten to meet and connect with, the conversations that I've been able to have, it's elevated. We talk about championship leadership. It actually, I got around people that challenged me to higher levels, right. Of excellence. And having conversations and hearing consistencies across the world of how people, how people lead, how people transform the area that they're passionate about. So yeah, it's been incredible.
That's it. How many episodes you get in on that now?
330.
That's a lot. That's great. And
Yeah.
how many years?
Almost 5,
5 years.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. I started
phenomenal.
off with 3 a week, and then we went to 2, and then we went to 1, and then I
Yeah.
tested 2 again. And I went, no, I like 1.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So, yeah.
One is a good spot. Who are some championship leaders that have impacted you in your life? Like, and this is always less about like who they actually are, but more so about really what is it about them? What are the characteristics? How do they lead? What sticks out to you? Maybe what have you taken to help mold you and who you are as a leader, as a coach as well, in your life?
Yeah. So there's been several. Some of them I've never met in person,
Mm-hmm.
but they're, people that have mentored me through their materials,
Yep.
like a Tony Robbins. I mean, I actually have seen Tony Robbins in person, but I haven't hung
Yeah.
out with him.
Yeah.
But he was, you know, he's been a great example, and I learned a lot from him. I did a year-long strategic intervention coaching program with Robbins Madonna's training,
Mm-hmm.
and learned how to create the shifts and the transformation in people. But even just watching him over the years, because I remember I'm old enough to remember when he first started,
Yeah.
and seeing this journey and some of the mistakes that he made along the way, and or the in the detours, and how coming back, and to see him. Another one is Les Brown.
Yeah.
Saw Les Brown do his "It's Not Over Until I Win" talk,
Yeah.
what, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
John Maxwell. One of the things that I had the opportunity to do as a result of that business organization was to see some incredible speakers. I've seen Ronald Reagan speak live.
Wow.
I've seen some of the, like, that caliber. And so there has been hundreds of people. I calculated at one point, I've seen over 7,000 live speakers on a stage or in my lifetime. And
That's
so
amazing. Holy
a
cows.
lot of leaders, a lot of great examples, but there are some that certainly do stand out. I mean, I'm a Christian, so obviously Jesus is a tremendous example. There's some great books on Jesus as the CEO,
Mm-hmm.
as the hospitable leader. One of the guests that I had on my show, Terry Smith, he wrote a book on that called The Hospitable Leader. And so, understanding how he was able to, the most incredible leader, and what he was able to accomplish, whether you believe in him as the Son of God or not.
Yeah.
3 years,
Yeah.
3 years, and we're still talking about the guy
Right.
2,000 years later.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It
And
is.
he took about, a group of ragtag, nobodies,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Fishermen, and
Yeah.
turned them into disciples and apostles, and that changed the world.
Yeah.
So that's pretty incredible. Another one is certainly Blair Singer. And Blair talks a lot about championship teams, building championship teams, how to build a code of honor within your team. He's a great leader and example, and I worked directly with him for a number of years. And and of course, I look at my parents, and even though there's some things that they didn't do when they needed to and step up, but when I look over their lifetime, I see especially my mom, actually, the tremendous leadership example, that no matter what, um, that it was like, steady, just keep going. And my dad, the same thing, just keep going, just
Yeah.
keep going, and not sacrifice your integrity for an outcome. Because one of the things that my parents, having, when their business fell apart, they lost everything financially. And at
Mm-hmm.
one point my parents said to me, wow, we didn't have an inheritance to leave to you, which was never obviously that was the plan, right? Part of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, the legacy and the inheritance that you left me was worth far more than finances
Yeah.
would ever do, was
Right.
the level of integrity, the level of loyalty that you demonstrated,
Yeah.
and honor to people. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. What's the vision for you? Championship leaders have great vision and the courage to take action on that vision. What's your vision for you and where you're headed? Let's say maybe in the near term. I know vision for some, it's like, I don't know. I mean, the vision can change. I stayed today and present, but what's the direction you're headed, the impact that you want to make over the near term, maybe even 5 years out, in what you're doing today.
Yeah. You know what? I think that we're either growing or dying.
Mm-hmm.
So we're either moving forward or moving backwards. There is no standing still.
Yeah.
life is changing all around us, especially now, right? It's changing
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
And so, but it's always moving, it's always shifting. And so, yes, I think it's important to stay in the now, but you got to have some vision
Yeah.
for where you're going. You know,
Right.
there's a scripture that says, where there is no vision, the people perish.
Irish.
Why?
Wow.
Why is that? Because they lose hope, right? They lose hope. They lose something to look forward to. If we don't have something to look forward to, we are by nature, we have two eyes, we're, you know, and then of course we have our internal vision, is we're designed to look at something. And so if we're not looking forward, we're going to be looking somewhere. We're going to be looking backwards. We're going to be looking at what's not happening. We've got to have something that we're looking towards. And so for me, you know, with the leaders of transformation, continuing to grow that, and specifically looking at growing the community, I've really asked myself the question of, what does the world really need right now? And so I've come up with some things. I'm actually working on a tech startup, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Can't talk about the details quite
Sure.
yet. We're
Yeah.
getting there, but it is it's some disruptive technology in a good way that
Mm-hmm.
we are building for the podcast space. So I'm excited. So
Oh,
I'll keep you
all
posted on
right.
that. And literally, it was another one of those visions. And I'm like, okay, God, if you really want me to do, it's a big deal. So if you want
Yeah.
me to do this, then you got to bring the right people around me and
Yeah.
give me the wisdom and direction and how to do it. And so that's where we're at right now. And then I'm also looking at generosity as, what does the world need right now? I think that generosity is something that is really important. What if the new currency was generosity? What if the new currency was kindness and compassion? And I think that the world needs that, especially now
Yeah.
more than ever, but it's always needed it.
Yeah.
And we think about, everybody wants abundance, everybody wants to live that great life. Okay, so how do you get to that great life? It's crazy, because if you think about fundamentally, and I'm a deep thinker, so I think this through, is that um, a lot of times what people are trying to do is they're trying to get to abundance through scarcity,
Mm-hmm.
through saving, through hoarding, through, I want to
Yeah.
get my message out there. I want to grow my thing. It's a me conversation versus a we conversation.
Yeah.
And so, so I'm exploring what it looks like to make generosity mainstream. And what does it take to, how do we measure generosity? How do we teach that, if we were to teach it and demonstrate it, of course, but how do we also teach that and communicate that so others can get on board with this idea that the path to an abundant life is actually through generosity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. What is a moment in your life? I call it kind of like that critical moment or defining moment. I'm sure you've had many, as we all do, but what's a moment where kind of that fork in the road? Obviously, you made the decision you have because it has you where you are today, but had you not, you could be in a very different place, right? I think there's a lot of listeners, entrepreneurs and business owners listening in here to this podcast that are probably in a very similar spot. And it's always good to just hear others that have been in similar situations and how they maneuvered through that and came out the other side. Is there a moment that sticks out to you that you could share?
Yep, absolutely. There is. Actually, I just heard a sermon on this, Stephen Furtick from Elevation Church, and it was called Staying Power. And he talks about this storm, and I'll relate it to my life because I was like, oh my gosh, I was there.
Yeah.
Is he talks about this storm, and Paul's in the storm, and it's the sailors. He's a prisoner on the ship, and the boat, like, they're in this storm, and they're like, we're not going to make it, and so they want to jump ship,
Yeah.
right, and save their lives. And he's like, you have to stay with the boat in order to survive, because I'm going to Rome. I know that I have an appointment in Rome, so I know we're going to get there, but you have to stay with the boat. And what
Mm-hmm.
was interesting is that it brought me back to a situation when I got married, and then my husband decided he didn't want to be married. And so we went on this whole roller coaster ride over this last 10 years. We're divorced now, but there was a point when, and I think we all get to that point where it's like, we just want to jump ship and say, forget it. I don't want to do this. And there was a point where I actually sought that guidance, in that inner guidance, divine guidance, whatever you want to call it, to say, what do I do in this moment? And it was that one of the darkest moments I would say certainly actually it was the darkest moment of my life, where I asked myself, what do I do? Because I didn't plan for this. This wasn't the way it was supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
And had I jumped ship too early, I would have missed the lesson and the gift in it. Now, we are divorced now, and
Mm-hmm.
there was a point where it's enough.
Yeah.
But before that, it was enough. I had to get the lesson. Otherwise, if I would have jumped ship early and I didn't get the lesson, I would have been bound to repeat it later.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think what happens is we're in the storm, we're in the challenge, whatever that, we get to that point in our life, and we quickly want to get out of it. We want to get beyond it. We want to push it behind us without taking the time to gather all the lessons. And it's the same thing that happened. My mother told me that once. She said, we all went through this experience with the business falling apart. We went through that together. She said, but the difference between us and you being me is that you extracted all of these lessons out of it that you then could build on, where we actually just looked at the impact of what it meant to us and how it hurt us.
Yeah.
Big difference in that.
Yeah.
So,
Huge.
yeah.
It's a big shift to make in life for sure. And that's been a theme that you've talked about a lot, is finding the lessons and everything that happens inside of your life. What was, are you able to share what the
Sure.
lesson was through that?
Yeah, it was actually love. It was love, and it was forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Could I love someone who wasn't just loving me back, and or somebody that was just ignoring me, but somebody that was actually deliberately hurting me?
Mm-hmm.
Could I love at that level? Tony Robbins actually talks about the levels of love, right? There's the
Mm-hmm.
trading, there's the I'll love you and I expect you to love me, right? And then there's
Yeah.
the I'll love you when you love me,
Yeah.
right? So there's all this trading
Yeah.
going on. And then there's a point where you can love people that don't love you back. But then there's a point of loving people to the extent that they actually might be hurting you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And so how can you love them? I'm not saying you accept or you condone their behaviors, two different things.
Right.
But so the lesson there for me was to love deep, and it was an opportunity for me to heal my heart.
Yeah.
And to say I love you and I don't accept the behavior.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
As we start to wrap this up, and that's a great one right there. But what would be, if you could share one or two things with the listeners that if they were to implement today, they could move themselves forward in their life today? What would those be?
Yeah, I think there's one really important piece that kind of goes along with what we've been talking about here, and it is the feedback loop.
Yeah.
And it's your own personal feedback loop with yourself. Call it a debrief, call it what you want. I like to call it the feedback group. It's when you check in at the end of the day and say, what worked today? What didn't work today? Why? What did I learn from it? And what am I going to do tomorrow that's going to build upon what worked, and or that's going to make course corrections on and make adjustments based on what didn't work? How can I get better? And not comparing yourself to someone else, but comparing yourself to your best, and for the best to keep getting better, as Dan Sullivan would say. So I would say that is one of the most important things a leader can do, because that's where you learn. Because if you don't learn the lesson, you're bound to repeat it.
Yeah.
And so I would do that on a daily basis. And part of that, woven into that, is also acknowledging your success. So some people are just so focused on, what did I do wrong? And you notice I didn't say wrong, right or wrong. I said what worked and what didn't work, because it either worked or it didn't work to get you to an outcome. When I say it's wrong, I make myself wrong. Then I start beating myself up and I'm diminishing myself. Right. And so then I have less power, less confidence going into the next day and the next day and the next day. So part of this built in is celebrating your wins, acknowledging the successes, starting there, acknowledging what you've done, what worked well and what you've done well. And then you can look at the things that didn't work. So really important piece this is all about self-awareness, right?
Right.
We talk about now more than ever, vulnerability, awareness, authenticity.
Hmm.
In order for you to be all of those things, you've got to check in with yourself, and
Yeah.
you got to be willing to check in. It sounds easy,
Yeah.
but ultimately it can be very uncomfortable to look at yourself and to be honest, truly honest with yourself. But that's where the growth comes from.
Yeah. Totally. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. What are some ways that we can find out more about you, your podcast? How can we follow you and see what you're up to?
Sure. So my podcast is leadersoftransformation.com. It's on all the major platforms. Um, uh, and well, the .com, of course, that's the website. You can go there. All the episodes are available there. We actually have a really neat search field. So you can type in leadership or some kind of, we also have categories, but you can
Hmm.
type in a name. You have Paul Edwards on your show. You can
Yeah.
type in Paul. Paul's been on the show, and his episode will come up. Another way is through discovertheedge.com, which is my coaching website. And so lots of ways. And of course, I'm all over social media as well.
Yeah.
So,
Perfect.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate you spending some time with us today. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You bet. Have a good day.
You too.